And Miranda, who was carried into the studio only a few minutes ago, is with us now. Welcome back, Miranda. Now, Michael, the government is now saying we could be in the single market for goods and the customs union till the end of 2021, maybe longer. How's this Brexit business going?
Brexit doesn't mean Brexit. The key promise of the Prime Minister is now nonsense. I mean,
so is it worth the candle?
We are not going to be sucked into an ever closer European Union. We will have left the European Union, and it seems to me that even if the Remainers got their way and there were a second referendum and we one day reapplied for membership, we would be required in coming back into the European Union to join the single currency.
Yeah.
And the British people, in my view, will never vote to go into the European Union and join the single currency.
That may be true if we can make maybe irreversible. I don't know. But what I'm asking now is is it worth the candle? I mean, if the price of single market access is staying largely in alignment with EU rules and regulations,
it's not
which seems to be, what's the point?
That's not the candle. That's my point. Nothing now is happening about trade and custom union, which looks like we're leaving the European Union.
No.
And we are bound by rules in the European Union to which we now make no contribution, or will make no contribution.
No, we'll be rule takers.
And we will be rule takers. We won't have members of the European
So
Parliament.
what's the point?
And the point is that we're outside the European Union, so we cannot be sucked into ever closer European Union. We can no longer be
But we'd
part
have to
of that
follow,
project.
we wouldn't be able to do our own trade deals, and we'd have to follow all the rules and regulations from Brussels, over which we'd have no say.
Well, I preempted you.
Is this what you voted for?
It is not what I voted for, but I preempted you by saying Brexit doesn't mean Brexit. That is the point that we have reached. The Prime Minister has been surrounded by Remainers. I think there has been a conspiracy to arrive at this situation. We've allowed the Northern Ireland situation to dictate the entire policy, and we arrive at a situation which everybody knows is unsatisfactory, and I think that's part of the plan as well, because the Remainers believe that it will be so unstable that it will trigger a reconsideration before long.
A lot of people say now that it's not David Davis doing the negotiations. It's Ollie Robbins, who's in the Cabinet Office. He's a senior civil servant. He was in David Davis's department, but they didn't get on together. But rather than getting rid of him altogether, he was brought wholeheartedly into the Cabinet Office. He's a Remainer, like all senior civil servants are, and that he's really calling the shots. And that he didn't even want a date on the backstop you were talking about in your report. Do you hear that as well?
Well, it seems to be the case, doesn't it, that David Davis is not fully in the loop on preparations for his own negotiating position. So it must be the case.
Because he had to insist on the change.
Absolutely,
which
after
meant he
the
wasn't
fact.
in the... Apparently the documents weren't circulated to him.
Absolutely. So he's trying to claw back a position that's already been taken by number 10. So that must be what's going on. And I'm very interested to hear Michael's reaction to today, because it seems to me the absolutely key thing is how the Conservative Party reacts to this. Because, you know, tonight you've already had Peter Bone saying, well, this isn't leaving, we're not leaving. But if you also have people taking Michael's view, maybe she'll get away with it, you know, because...
See, the one thing they say in Downing Street, they say, oh, this is just a backstop for a start. We would hope to do a deal before December 2021. And within this, yeah, we're signing up still for a period to a customs union, probably to single market in goods, but no free movement. And that seems to matter more to Mrs. May. That's the one thing she seems to think that she still has to deliver. Of course, we don't know whether Mr. Barney is going to say, all right, you can have all this, but no free movement.
It may be too much like cherry picking.
Exactly. So we're still going to wait on that. Alan, the government's position is, what shall we say, to be kind of difficult. Can you tell us about Labour's position? What bit of it makes sense?
None of it in terms of that amendment. That amendment would have been fine 2 years ago, when you're talking around the edges about where you go and what direction you take. You know, you have things like complete access to the single market. Now's not the time for that. Now's the time to come down with a policy that is meaningful and that the EU can understand as well, the Commission can understand. To me, it's always been that the outcome of Article 50 will either be we crash out with no deal, or we drop into EEA.
But again, it's interesting you do that, but the EEA, again, I think why Mr. Corbyn and Mr. MacDonald and others are a bit reluctant to go down this road now is on the free movement issue, because if you're in the EEA, there is free movement.
Well, they haven't said that. That is a fair point, except that as I keep pointing out, there's things happening now. So look at what Switzerland have done in terms of their deal. They're part of EFTA.
They're not part of the EEA.
Not part of the EEA. If there's things we're going to negotiate
but Brussels have said they will not accept the result of that Swiss referendum.
That's always the issue, and that might be the breakdown.
And they haven't stopped free movement.
But at least we would have a policy and a clear direction of where we go. I think Michael's view is fascinating, by the way.
Don't you think it was interesting tonight?
I think it was really interesting. And I'll buy into that, actually, because what was on the ballot paper is, do we leave or do we remain? And Michael's point about ever closer union, which I don't agree with, but it's always been his point. I think it disappeared years ago. But I'm prepared to give that a run and say...
choosing a future path.
And say we keep the economic advantages, but we don't get sucked into ever closer union.
Michael?
I would defend that.
I'm just slightly disconcerted. I didn't mean to say anything interesting.
Well, you really do.
We're slightly disconcerted because you did. And I may well have to go and lie in a dark room after this programme to get over it. But again, I mean, the nature of our future relationship with the EU, it won't now be determined until we enter the transition period. It will probably go beyond the transition period because we've now added another year with this backstop at Miranda. But we start to pay the £39 billion immediately after the March of next year. I mean, we've been outmanoeuvred on this.
That is an understatement. Textbooks will be written on the inefficiency of the incompetence of the British negotiation. But to call it incompetence is to be too kind. I think this has been a conspiracy. I mean, this, as you said a moment ago, you know, all the senior civil servants are Remainers. About half the cabinet are Remainers. Probably more than half the Conservative Parliamentary Party are Remainers.
Do you think it's conspiracy rather than just that they're not up to it?
Well, what they weren't up to was doing their duty, in my view. I mean, the British people had voted to leave, but they continued to take this patrician view that the British people had got it wrong and shouldn't be allowed to do something which was going to do them so much damage.
Is the May government teetering on the brink now?
Well, the thing is, we've thought that for well over.
There's been a lot of teetering.
There's been a lot of teetering since the election this time last year. I mean, the thing is, earlier today it looked as if her cabinet could collapse, as if the negotiation would have to be put in the hands of somebody else. But actually, it keeps staggering on. And if we end up with some sort of compromise deal which can be made acceptable to large chunks of those who voted leave, not all of them by any means, then actually the May government may have pulled something out of this horrendous sort of fix that they're in. But if they can survive long enough.
I think I'm atypical of Leavers because I didn't want there to be a referendum in the first place.
That's true. Mr. Barnier has to work out how hard he pushes this now because, you know, a number of nation states have been saying to Mr. Barnier, let's not push it too hard. And he keeps on saying, well, every time I push it hard, I win. And you see, in this business now that we've had we leave legally in March, but then we have the transition period, which free movement of peoples continues. But the British are assuming that free movement ends with the end of the transition, but we still go to the backstop without free movement. If he turns around and says, actually, if you want the backstop with a date of December, you're going to have to continue free movement to then I think that puts the government in a really difficult position.
It does, but you know, all the analysis shows that immigration is going down the public's concern. That might be because they voted.
That's another matter. It should be an issue. It's another matter.
But I think that what Barnier is conscious of is he doesn't want May to go. He wants her there. I can't see there being another general election. I mean, you know, we've got a Fixed-Term Parliament Act. It needs 2/3 of Parliament to vote to have an election, or the government to pass a vote of no confidence in itself twice to trigger an election. I don't think it's going to happen.
We'll leave it there. Something tells me we might come back to it. Though I doubt if Michael will say anything interesting again. I mean, I'll have to wait.
I should certainly try.
Record the date.
I should certainly try not to.
We'll have to wait
Got
another
in my
decade.
diary tonight.
Miranda, thank you for that.
Thank you.